Cameron McCarthy has been leading with his team this entire process. We've had, even though they're from outside of the city, they've got strong connections here. They've done a lot of work in Hermiston with the school district and so forth, so we feel like they are as close to a local team as we could put together. And I'm very, very pleased with the work that they've done for us. So the quality of this work is exceptional. The public engagement portion, which Colin is going to review, has just been well over the top. And so I'm happy to reveal through Colin what he has found that really maps out the next 10 to 20 years for the city of Hermiston. So Colin, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Unfortunately, Larry, I couldn't make out much of what you said. I could hear the gentleman that spoke at the beginning very clearly, but I think the people on the outside of the room, I'm having a difficult time hearing.
So why don't you go ahead and jump into it, and then we'll hold off our questions till the end, because I think it's going to be too disruptive.
Okay, I will go ahead and begin, and I'll make a couple notes about participation to start. If you are participating in this meeting online through WebEx, we're going to do a presentation and would ask that all questions be held until the end. If you would like to ask a question via WebEx, there are 8 buttons on the bottom of your screen. The third button from the left is a chat button. If you open that up, it'll open a chat window, and you can type a question directed at us, and we will come back to it and address it at the end. And then if there are questions from the individuals in the room, I'm going to ask that they either speak from the center of the room so that we can hear, or relay those questions to Brandon, who I think is in the room, and he'll either type them up for us or relay them to us verbally. It's just a little hard to hear where we are based on the size of that room. But I will launch into our presentation, and just flag me down or send me a notification via chat if I need to slow down or stop. Stepping back, my name is Colin MacArthur. I'm a principal and a planner with Cameron McCarthy. We are a landscape architecture and planning firm with offices in Eugene and Portland. And I'm joined on this presentation by my associate, Liz Aubil. I'm in Eugene and she is in Portland. And unfortunately, we had hoped to do this meeting in person, but the restrictions that have been in place for the last few months have prevented us from doing that. We do appreciate you all coming out and joining us for this meeting in Hermiston, because this is a monumental or pivotal point for the parks planning effort. A little background: this project was and is of personal interest for me. I grew up in Eastern Oregon, about an hour west of Hermiston in Sherman County. Umatilla High School was in our conference, Columbia Basin Conference, growing up. We spent a lot of time there. Had a bunch of family that resided in the Dalles that now reside in Hermiston, Umatilla, and Pendleton. And I tend to watch things or pay attention to things that are happening in Eastern Oregon. It's been fascinating to watch Hermiston become really the vibrant, diverse, largest community in Eastern Oregon that it is today. We finished a similar effort for the city of the Dalles and the northern Wasco County Park and Rec District in 2018, 2019, developing the district's first Parks Master Plan. So we were fortunate to be selected by Larry and the city to continue our parks planning work and help the city of Hermiston. So with that, I'm going to launch into a few acknowledgments. First, I want to acknowledge the Hermiston Parks and Recreation Committee. We met with them about 5 times during the planning process. They helped us establish the goals for the project, outline our public involvement and outreach approach, identify planned projects, and then to prioritize those projects. We met with them on Thursday night, and the Parks and Recreation Committee did recommend adoption of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space PROS plan, as we're calling it, with some minor changes to the vision statement, which we've accommodated, and I'll show you tonight. I also want to acknowledge Parks and Recreation Department staff, Larry, Brandon, everyone else. They were fantastic to work with throughout this process, and very accommodating, and provided all the support we needed for this effort. And then I also want to acknowledge the contributions of Hermiston School District. This is actually the first plan we've worked on that started with collaboration with the city and the school district, and I don't have a good explanation for why it isn't always done this way. I think we're just used to developing our separate facility plans and coordinating those at the end, but the Hermiston School District was an early partner, and that allowed consistent collaboration throughout the process. Larry Usher served on the Parks Committee and helped us with facility assessment and inventory and other coordination. We did do a joint inventory and assessment of both city and school district facilities, and the school district even allowed us to do some master planning of unused properties for future parks. So we think all of this, all the coordination of planning efforts between the city and the school district helps maximize public benefit and how we are using parks and recreation facilities now and into the future. I'll switch now and talk a little bit about our timeline. Generally, we do about 1 or 2 of these projects a year, and typically they take about a year. We were aiming for, or we're on track for about 9 months, but we've been slowed down over the last few months by everything that is happening in the world. So right now we're at about a year. We started the process in July of last year, and we hope to be moving towards adoption near the end of this month or the beginning part of August. Really, the purpose of this meeting is to present a final draft of the parks plan, identify any changes, questions, revisions that the council would like to see before we finalize the plan and move it forward to adoption. Working back to July, the plan was, or the planning effort was divided into 6 phases, which correspond to 6 chapters in the plan. First phase was project initiation, which happened during the first month. We did background research, reviewed the prior plan, reviewed the city's development code, and county, city comprehensive plans, as well as whatever other studies were available. And we worked with the Parks and Recreation Committee to finalize our public involvement and outreach approach, committee involvement and outreach, and I'm going to ask my associate Liz to speak to the next 2 phases because she led most of the planning on both the outreach and the needs assessment phases. So Liz?
Hi, good evening everyone. Our community outreach and involvement process involved several different methods over the last year. We attended community events with pop-up event booths, and we interviewed stakeholders in the community, as well as meeting with focus groups and having specific conversations with them about the park system. And then we also did, our longest running event was the online survey with individuals in the community. And we use these different methods to collect and document community feedback and represent a wide variety of residents using the park system and recreation programs. And after our outreach and during a little bit of our outreach, we started our needs assessment process, which involves developing an inventory of the park system, like Colin mentioned, as well as collecting data about demographics and population in Hermiston, and then also analyzing recreation trends and what's happening in recreation. And the needs assessment in the end provides a view of the facilities and programs that we're going to prioritize in the plan.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. The needs assessment phase extended to about the end of 2019 and early 2020, which is why there's that long gap in the timeline. From there, we moved into vision, crafting a vision statement, identifying goals that provide broad direction towards achieving the vision, and then identifying action, narrative under each goal that describes how the planning or plan process will achieve those goals into the future. Next phase of the planning effort was recommendations, and we developed several categories of recommendations for the park system, improvements to recreation facilities and the development of new facilities, improvement to existing park facilities, the development of new park facilities, the development of open space and natural areas, land acquisition and land banking for future parks, and then the development of future parks where they are needed. And then another component was the development or expansion of the city's trail system, as well as recommendations associated with communications and operations and maintenance. The final phase, which came together over the last 2 months really, is the implementation phase. And that's where we identify all the planned projects, the costs that are associated with those planned projects, how we prioritize those projects over the 20-year planning period, and then considerations for both operations and maintenance, and how the projects are going to be funded into the future. I'll start with talking about the baseline, what we found, and when we did an assessment and inventory of both the city system and the school district system. And this is a map that shows our park inventory and where the distribution of facilities are located. In total, the city has 15 park and recreation facilities. This includes the Hermiston Family Aquatic Center, which is a component of Butte Park. It has 2 trail facilities, which are denoted in with the orangish red dotted lines on the plans. And then moving across to the school district has 8 developed schools facilities, which are shown in the light purple, light gray. In total, this is a summary table from our inventory. The city has approximately 142 acres of developed parkland. It has 10.5 miles of trail, and it owns about 12 acres of undeveloped land that has the potential to be developed as parkland in the future. And we're going to talk about 2 projects for developing that land when we get to the planned project section, which are Steelhead Park and the Teen Adventure Park. Over on the school district side, there are about 233 acres of developed land, including buildings and facilities themselves, and about 30 acres of undeveloped land. And if we compare the city and the school district to where they were in 2007, which is when the last plan was completed, we show that the city added about 40 acres of parkland over the past 12 years, and the school district added about 70 acres of total land over the past 12 years. That gives us some sense of what can be accomplished in the next 10 and 20-year planning periods. The next step in the inventory process was to look at how well the parks and open space system is serving the residents of Hermiston. And there are several metrics that we look at when we're evaluating level of service. The first is distribution, and it's shown fairly well graphically with this display. Each park, you can imagine each park is associated with a service area, and there are 2 ways that we evaluate service area. The first is walkability. Generally, a quarter mile is about, on average, the distance a person or an individual is willing to walk to reach a park facility. So that is shown in light blue. And then, according to the National Recreation and Park Association, if facilities are larger, they tend to serve a larger area and residents are willing to go further to access the amenities at those facilities. So we apply a half-mile radius to the larger facilities, which are the community parks, Butte Park, Riverfront Park, and Theater Sports Park. And if we overlay those two things, we can see what areas of Hermiston are well served by park facilities and what areas are underserved or park land deficient. And what this tells us is that the southwest area of Hermiston is underserved by park facilities. This area, if you can see my cursor, and particularly the east side of Hermiston is underserved by park facilities. Most of the park and recreation facilities are located in the core or on the west side or slightly on the west side of Hermiston. So this gives us some indication of where park facilities need to be developed and planned in the future in conjunction with developing residential land. Another metric we look at is residents per park, and this is a fairly simple way of looking at a park system. We take the number of facilities and divide it by the population estimate, and these are population estimates from PSU, so it does include the urban area population as well as the city limits population. But if we divide that, we get a ratio of there are about 14 residents per each park facility in Hermiston, with there being 15 of those. So if we want to maintain that ratio, which the plan does recommend at a minimum, the city would need to acquire, develop 3.5 or 4 additional parks in the next 20 years to maintain the residents per park ratio. That ratio is a little simple. I prefer a little more nuanced ratio, and that is acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. And for this calculation, we exclude special use areas and linear parks and natural resource parks. We do include many neighborhood, community, and regional parks because those are the parks that tend to attract or provide amenities that attract residents of all ages. So they have a broad appeal. And when we add up that acreage and divide it by 1,000 residents, we get a ratio of 4.6 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. Using NRPA data, when we compare that ratio to communities of similar size all across the country, we find that Hermiston is in the lower quartile, with the lower quartile average being 5.5, the median value being 9.6 acres per thousand, and the highest, the most parkland per thousand is 15.9. So at a minimum, the plan recommends maintaining the level of service, the current level of service in the future. If opportunities present themselves, the plan does recommend that Hermiston try to increase the level of service over time to achieve the median, or achieve the lower, and then to reach the median. We know this will involve acquisition of land, development of land. So the baseline, again, we're recommending is at least maintain, if not try to increase the level of service. And this means that as the population increases over the next 20 years from 21,000, 26,000, which is what the projections show us, that a minimum the city will need to acquire and develop another 22.5 acres of parkland. And with the slide I showed you earlier, currently there's only 12 acres of undeveloped parkland in city ownership, but we do have strategies for bringing more parkland online, which I'll get into when we start going into the planned projects. I'm going to ask, turn back to Liz to give us a little more detail on the community outreach and involvement process.
Thanks. The activities that we included, like I mentioned, stakeholder interviews were done, and those involved community members that represented a wide variety of park and recreation interests. We also had we met with focus groups, and those groups represented business, youth, and Hispanic perspectives. And we also attended 3 different community events last summer and fall, and we had pop-up events at Spudfest, the Umatilla County Fair, and the Trailblazers Road City Rally. And then our longest involvement piece was the online survey, and we had over 700 responses, which was a really strong response rate for us.
Thanks, Liz. So, every project I work on recently that has a decent funding amount for public involvement and outreach likes to claim that this is the best and most robust public involvement or outreach approach they've done. In this case, I think it actually is. I don't think we've done, I'm positive we have not done this array of activities in any other plan update. And that is in part because we're learning how to do this better. The open house events are always successful. It's better to go out in the places where people are to get their input and their opinions. So we were fortunate to be able to do the pop-up events. And then, yeah, we did have the survey up for a long time, but this is the highest, or the most responses that we've gotten on an online survey in proportion to the population of any plan that we've done. So I think we can definitively say that the community was very involved throughout this process. We collected a lot of good input, which helped lead us into the findings from the needs assessment, which Liz is also going to summarize for us.
Yeah, the findings from the needs assessment fell into 2 different categories, recreation and facility. And on the recreation side, we found a need for program options for low-income residents, as well as swimming programs targeted to Hispanic residents, as well as youth after school and organized sports, and year-round recreation and swimming opportunities. And then there are a few others, including decreasing language barriers and programs with childcare, and then also being able to provide programs for all abilities and disability inclusive. And then on the facility side, there was a strong need for an indoor facility and universally accessible facilities. There was also a need for expanding the trail facilities in Hermiston. And then, like Colin mentioned, there's a need for parks on the east side of town and the northeast side, or the northeast area as well. And then, in general, expanding athletic fields, and also restrooms, water access, and a skate park.
Thanks, Liz. Moving on to vision and goals. This is the vision statement that really we spent a year working on and just finalized with the Parks Committee on Thursday. We're happy with it. We think it's representative of the community, and it really evolved throughout the process, and it encapsulates the strengths, needs, characteristics, and values of the community. Hermiston actively provides inviting parks, trails, and programs for all walks of life. We celebrate our unique abilities, values, and cultures. Parks and recreation facilities and programs are the heart of our physical and emotional well-being. Vision is supported by 6 goals: accessibility and distribution, which centers on improving connectivity and distributing new parks to underserved areas; community health, which acknowledges the findings from the 2018 Umatilla County Health Assessment and promotes year-round flexible recreation opportunities for all residents. An indoor facility fits well with this goal. Diversity centers on tailoring park facilities, amenities, and recreation programs to all ages and all user groups. Natural resource and conservation recognizes the unique regional context and landscape and looks at preserving natural areas, open space, wetlands, waterways, and river corridors where feasible. Local and regional character, we think this can be expressed through branding, park furnishings and signage. We're aware of the signage and wayfinding package that the council recently approved, and that is included as an appendix to the park's master plan. And then finally, maintenance and facility upgrades. This one is about taking care of what you have. When we did the survey, residents expressed, or participants in the survey expressed a high satisfaction rate with the way parks and recreation facilities are maintained. Parks and Rec Department is doing a good job. Facilities are well taken care of. So this is about maintaining, again, what you have, and then assessing the maintenance and operation needs of new facilities as they come online. Now I'm going to move into what we really think is the heart of the project, or the most exciting elements of it. And within this, we were able, Larry was kind enough to allow us to do some design work on park facilities. So I'm going to show you 6 concepts for redeveloped or new parks as part of this, but in total, the plan includes 22 projects over the next 20 years. 3 of those are recreation facility projects, 9 are park development projects, 1 is a new natural area park project. There are 5 land acquisition areas identified for future parks, and then 4 trails projects. And those are depicted on this map, the locations and the names, with the dashed orange line for trails projects, and then dots for park improvement projects, existing parks, and then diamonds for park facility development. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. There's a lot of detail. I'm going to give you a quick summary of each of the planned projects, and I will start with what was the most popular project and arguably the highest need in the needs assessment planning effort, and that is a health, wellness, and aquatic center. And we're aware of and have reviewed the work the city has done on pre-design and feasibility for this project. Our plan includes a 67,000 square foot health, wellness, and aquatic center. It does have an indoor aquatic component. It has wellness venues. It has youth and community areas, locker rooms, and other support spaces. The plan identifies the north side of the high school campus as the preferred site for this facility. An alternative site would be the regional sports complex, the east side of that, which I will show you a concept for as we get further along. But back to this indoor facility is the #1 project that is identified in the plan. Other recreation projects are an assessment of the long-term modernization and maintenance needs of the Hermiston Family Aquatic Center to keep that facility viable in the future. And then a third project we're recommending is renovation of the ARC building to function as temporary Parks and Rec Department offices if there is a need for temporary office space in advance of the indoor aquatic center being constructed. And then also the conversion, it's a great building, the conversion of that building into a future community and arts center. Now on to the park projects. So this is the first park we did conceptual design work for, and this concept is for a regional sports park on the current location of the disc golf course on 11th and Elm. The needs assessment identified a need for more playing fields to support youth, and then really also adult sports, and primarily a need for more soccer fields in the community. There isn't a regional sports complex or park in Hermiston. I believe the nearest one, proximity-wise, is in Tri-Cities, and so yeah, that Hermiston does seem ready and primed for a complex of this caliber that can host tournaments. In addition to soccer, the fields would be multi-purpose and able to accommodate soccer, flag football, and other sports. And we've broken this project out into the 3 phases, with the first phase being 4 fields and off-street parking. Second phase is another 4 fields and off-street parking. And the final phase, there's an optional phase for a synthetic turf upgrade. The final phase would be field lighting so that we can make these fields playable or extend the playing hours of playability for these fields. The complex also includes play areas and a bike skills course and trails. Moving on, we did some work on Butte Park and identified some upgrades to that facility. First would be a dog park that is located, I should point out that north is actually to the left on these maps. The maps have been rotated for display. North is to the left, so the dog park would be west of where the existing splash play area is. And in addition to a dog park, the plan includes a new trailhead, formalizing the trail system, and then upgrades to the fields to make them more playable and usable year-round. And then a preceding project is the development of Funland, which is occurring really over this summer. Other improvements include expanded parking and then a safer pedestrian crossing on 7th Street. Moving on, we did some work on Riverfront Park. We're aware that the park was impacted by flooding this past spring, and there is a need to relocate some of the major facilities. This concept looks at relocating and improving the off-street parking area, constructing a new playground, and then new restrooms, new shelter, and then improving or reconnecting to the Riverfront Trail system. So this is about upgrades to Riverfront Park to improve or extend the life of that facility. Steelhead Park, again, north is to the left, is a piece of property, undeveloped property that the city owns or has acquired that is south of Riverfront Park across Highland Road. And we think this site has the potential to be a linear park. This concept includes extending the Riverfront Trail, an off-street parking area with boat trailer parking, a boat launch for small non-motorized boats access Umatilla River, and then a couple picnic shelters with seating underneath it, as well as other passive use recreation areas. Moving along, this is what we're calling Getman Park. It is a piece of property that the school district was kind enough to allow us to master plan that is south of Larby Middle School, next to some newer residential development, which we think would benefit from a small neighborhood park in the area. This is also an area that is underserved by parks. This concept looks at really a small neighborhood park, a multi-sport court, a children's playground, a playing field that can be used for informal play, and then a walking loop around the park with connections to the surrounding neighborhood, as well as about 12 off-street parking areas, restroom, and a couple picnic shelters. One of the second to last parks we did conceptual design work for is what we're calling Field of Dreams Park. It really needs a better name. We just haven't been able to come up with a better name for this, but it's really an extension of the existing Field of Dreams baseball complex. Concept looks at improving and expanding, formalizing the existing parking that is there now, constructing a large children's playground for the entire complex, constructing a trail along what I believe is called Hermiston Ditch, the waterway that extends through the area, and then constructing 3 natural turf lacrosse fields parallel to Hawker Road. And again, this is a piece of property that is owned by the school district that they were kind enough to allow us to work on, because it all is also in an area that is underserved by park facilities. And then finally, the last part we did conceptual design work and master plan work for is the we're calling the Baker's Pond Natural Area Park. And this is on the east side of Hermiston, along Elm Avenue. We know that the city is working on acquiring this site. It has some ponds and some wetland and marsh areas. And so this would be really Hermiston's first natural area park. And it would include the trailhead, walking trails around the ponds, a boardwalk segment that crosses the ponds, restrooms, picnic shelters, seating, and viewing opportunities, as well as some in-water work to really restore the habitat areas within the ponds and surrounding the ponds, invasive species removal, and other restoration and enhancement activities. And then we think there is some potential to expand the park to the west in the future. There are, even with these facilities coming online, we do think that the city should look at acquiring land and banking land for future park development into the future. So we have identified 3 acquisition and development areas, A1, A2, A3. A1 is in the northeast, A2 is in the east, and A3 is in the southwest. And the recommendations include acquiring a site in each of these areas that is between 5 and 15 acres, and then developing neighborhood parks in these areas within the next 10 to 20 years. So the A projects are acquisition land banking projects again. There are 2 parks that we think are going to come online in the next 2 to 5 years that will help increase the city's level of service. They also happen to be in areas that are underserved by parks. The first is Cimarron Park, and we know the city is working on acquiring about 7 acres to develop a new neighborhood park to serve this area. And the plan includes some recommendations that support that project. And then another park that is associated with the development, small park, Monte Vista, about 1 acre. We hope that the city can acquire and develop a small neighborhood or small mini park to serve the surrounding residential development. And the plan does include some recommendations for improving that park. So again, all these facilities help meet the future need for parks in the future. Moving on quickly to the trails, the plan identifies 4 future trail projects to expand the city's trail system and improve connectivity. First is the Oxbow Trail Spur. That's an 8-mile trail that goes from Belt Park to Hermiston Park, Belt Park to Harrison Park, and then connects to Riverfront Park. Second project is this idea for an on-street loop system. It's 10.5 miles that extends around really the core or the center of Hermiston. I won't go into all the locational descriptions here, but the idea is that this is mostly on street, and then there is a spur that extends along Highland Avenue towards the Field of Dreams complex on the right. Third trail project is what we're calling Canal Trail or Sandstone Crossing Trail. This is 1.3 mile trail that goes from the planned Getman Park to Hodge Park and then connects to downtown and the community center. and this is along an existing irrigation canal and would require coordination and acceptance by the Hermiston Irrigation District, which we're in the process of coordinating with them on these projects. And then finally, Baker's Pond Trail, our last trail project, is a 1.5 mile trail that goes from the planned Baker's Pond Park to Theater Sports Park to the east. And finally, I've given you the high-level detail for the projects, but all of the projects are supported by a detailed capital improvements plan that has a project description. It summarizes the need for each project, identifies future funding sources and phasing, and it includes order of magnitude cost estimates for each project, which also include land acquisition, planning, design, construction, and all administrative costs that would be necessary for realizing the projects. And this is the map that accompanies the CIP and identifies each facility with a facility ID number, excuse me. From there, the last two pieces of this are what we would call, first is prioritization. And so we looked at the overall cost for each of these projects, whether the projects were phased, and then broke the projects out into 3 separate phases or priority levels: high, medium, and low. And these generally correspond to time increments. So high priority projects are the projects which we would hope to achieve in the first 6 years. Medium priority is the next 6 years. Excuse me, I got that wrong. First 7 years. Medium priority is the second 7 years, and low priority is the final 6 years, and all that adds up to 20. So in order to do prioritization, we went back through all of our community input, figured out what the community wanted. We looked at what council goals were for the last few years. The Parks and Recreation Committee helped us establish priorities. The Parks and Recreation Department staff assisted with this. We did look at distribution and geospatial analysis. We looked back at what projects had not been completed in the plan, and then we used other data from other relevant plans and policies and aggregated all of this and came up with this prioritization schedule. And what we generally try to achieve by the prioritization schedule is balance, an equal amount of funding per year for each of the planned projects. In this case, we have one very large project, and that is the Health, Wellness, and Aquatic Center that we've given a large funding allocation, 35 million, because it is a major project. And technically, the range in the CIP is 28 to 35 million to accomplish everything that we described for that project. That is a major facility development project. If we were to take that out of the schedule, we'd end up with about 12 million in the first 7 years, 11 million in the second 7 years, and 10 million over the third 6-year period. So generally, it would be balanced, but because that project is our #1 planning priority in this framework, it skews the prioritization schedule, but that is also intentional because it is such an important project to the community. So finally, I'm going a little long now, so I'm going to move through funding real quickly, and this is just really the tools that the city can and will use to fund these projects. I just want to note that this is really a visionary and aspirational document. It is not a project-specific funding and financing plan. It is expected that most of the projects will be realized, but not all of them will, which is common in these parks planning efforts. Just as not all the projects were realized in the last plan, we are carrying a few forward into this planning effort. And we present this as a menu of options, and they're arrayed as a menu that is intended to be adaptable and flexible as needs shift or new opportunities arise. And we fully expect that the Parks and Recreation Committee will maintain their role in prioritizing each year's projects, using this document as a guide and accounting for shifting needs or new opportunities. This plan is not an ask. We're not asking for anything from council. All we ask that the council affirm the plan as representative of how the community will move forward park and recreation services during the next 20 years. And so again, stepping back, this is a visionary plan. We think it's a strong plan. We're very pleased with how it turned out and the design work and planning work and estimating that we were able to do. And we think it puts the city in a strong position to realize these projects over the next 20 years and recognize how these projects contribute to livability and contribute to ensuring that Hermiston will continue to be a vibrant and thriving community and have facilities that, like parks and rec facilities, that will make people want to live and stay in the community and raise families in the community. And so with that, I've gone a little long, but I'm going to stop talking now, and I would love to take any questions or hear discussion from council or anybody in the room. Again, with the caveat that I am having a hard time hearing from the room. So Brandon or Larry, if you can help round up the questions and summarize them for us, that would be really helpful. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you, Colin. This is Mayor Grothman. I want to thank you and Liz for your work on this project. Obviously, a lot of community effort, a lot of your effort from a consultant standpoint. I love the fact that we had so much community input, so much engagement from the community, and I appreciate the efforts that were put in to try and engage the community's interest in this and include them in this process, because this is their city and they should have a complete say in how we develop it and how we move forward over the next 20 years. So I really appreciate all the effort that you guys put into reaching out to the community and making sure they were involved. Councilors, are there any questions that any of you have of Colin or Liz while they're on the phone today? Roy.
Hi, this is Councilor Brown. I have a question regarding Newport Park and more basketball facilities. In terms of having courts to play, Newport Park is one of the only places where at least I know a lot of community members play basketball. I know that the Portland Trailblazers there was a project in which they constructed basketball. But I'd like to see, or I'd like to know maybe in the planning process of where the consideration of more basketball facilities, or at least the maintenance of the facilities that are currently now.
Yeah, no, that's a good, thank you for bringing it up. And that was a project that was identified through community involvement, and a project that we're conscious of and aware of. The plan, if you noticed, mostly talked about new projects or major projects, new facilities that are coming online, or new parks. So it doesn't address sort of like the minimal improvements to existing parks and what we would call deferred maintenance or routine facility upgrades. So we would call the improvement or enhancement of the basketball courts as one of those projects, deferred maintenance, and would be considered as part of the normal Parks and Rec Committee prioritization. However, because I have heard that, the need for that project, improving the basketball court several times, I do feel sort of compelled to make sure that that does get in the capital improvements plan. so that the Parks and Rec Committee can consider how and when to do that project in the future, because we agree that the basketball courts do need some attention and some improvement at Newport Park.
Other councilors? Larry, do you have any other comments that you would like to make?
Just brief. Again, thank you, Colin, very much. So if you go to the map, Colin, could you pull the map up again?
I don't think he can hear you.
Oh, the map. Okay, I can barely hear Larry.
So one of the things that I want to illustrate is that the spine or the center trail component is what regionally is being called the Umatilla River Trail, and that's recognized. Colin had to cover a lot of material here in his presentation, but that is illustrated. It's a multi-jurisdictional project that would go from Umatilla to Echo. So it is, you can see it kind of conceptually illustrated. This one assumes that Getman does become extended out to
Oh, yes, the Umatilla River Trail project. Yeah, that's, it's not on the CIP map. We did add it to the system map. Let me go back to it. Okay, yes, it's on this map shown as a green dash line.
I think the other thing that I want to touch on briefly is that because it's highly conceptual, there will be other opportunities that aren't necessarily recognized in this plan. Land dedications, opportunities that we just haven't anticipated yet. So this recognizes that. There have been conversations about Cimarron Park in partnership with UEC. It's recognized, but not necessarily called out as a specific project. So it's very comprehensive in its presentation, but there will be other opportunities that will arise.
Larry, just a couple of clarifications. One thing that, if this is going to be an executive summary that we're going to use to present to the public or put in some sort of formal setting, the contents page doesn't match up with the summary. So finding stuff in here was very difficult. So just kind of from a, recommendations, I would just make sure the contents and the pages line up if this is going to be an executive summary we'll use. And then secondly, maybe some sort of budgeted dollars as far as acquisitions of parks. I know that you've titled in here planned projects and prioritization schedules. And I'm guessing that some of those are property acquisition dollars, not park development dollars. So I'm not sure if that's clear in here. And so have we budgeted as a council or as a city dollars to set aside for property acquisition?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. All of the three acquisition area projects, A1, A2, A3, do include a budget amount for a land acquisition, and that's the first phase in the prioritization schedule. And then the second two numbers in medium below would be the development costs. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that we should clarify that, and we'll make it clear that it does include land acquisition. And then yeah, we can do some work on lining up the contents. I think what you're seeing is maybe the index from the overall plan, and that doesn't line up with the executive summary. So we can fix that to make it clear.
Perfect, thank you. And Byron, just as a kind of side note here, how does this fit in with our budgeting plan and the city's future allocation of resources as far as property acquisition?
Well, this would then get worked into our budgeting process, our planning process as we look at it each year. So, we would look at these projects, we would look at what are the realistic things we can work on, and it just gives us a roadmap to start working on. Some of them will be a little bit at a time, but we would just.
Yeah, that's a good-
into our plan.
That's a good explanation, good answer.
So tonight, in this work session, we were just doing a presentation to the council. This will be brought back for formal adoption at some point?
Right, our current schedule would be to bring it back at the next meeting, so July 27th for adoption of the plan.
Okay. So once it's adopted, council accepted, then we can start looking at budget allocation, just like we did with the CPI or the capital improvement project, CIP, or transportation master plans, or any other adopted council level articles that we've reviewed in the past as well. Okay. Right?
Quick question, do soccer fields also double up as lacrosse fields? Because I know when we were talking about the regional sports complex, we said soccer field specific, but when we went to the Field of Dreams, you said very specifically lacrosse fields. I just wanted to clarify if they double up,
Yeah.
or is there something specific?
No, they can. We wanted we were trying to meet we know there's a need for soccer field, there's also a need for lacrosse field, so we wanted to identify those distinctly on our different concepts. But the idea is that both of those facilities would be developed as multi-purpose fields, so they could accommodate soccer, lacrosse, flag football, really any other sports. That would be the most logical way to develop them, and we would encourage, although it might be soccer first, they do accommodate other sports.
And just to follow up, I really do appreciate the work that you've done. The focus group specifically, I was really happy to participate in the Hispanic Advisory Committee one, in which I know that it's made it onto the plan of having or prioritizing Latino kids to be able to go on and swim and have the swim lessons, because it's clear that there's a huge disparity and a need for that. The other thing I'm really happy about is A3 specifically. I know that there's a park that looks like it's going to make its way to Getman Park, but if you're in that neighborhood, it's clear that there's different characteristics and economic status when you hit that neighborhood. And I find it hard for maybe kids that are in those trailer parks to make their way more into the affluent neighborhood to go into the Getman Park. I just feel like that would be a barrier, so I'm really happy to see that there is another acquisition that's going to be there. I just wouldn't want there to be any more barriers for people of color to be able to have fun in their community as well. So I'm extremely happy about the acquisition and the need to fill in parks all in our community.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great observations.
And Byron, do we have a foundational level potential for donation, so that people could, as part of their planning for the future endowments or charitable donations, that they could allocate land to the city as part of that? That's something that could be done.
It absolutely could be done. We don't have a program in place, but if anybody has that opportunity, we would be able to accommodate and help facilitate that type of a donation. We also, every time a new subdivision comes in, the Parks Department participates, and we talk about could they accommodate a park, and that's two of them that were mentioned in Colin's presentation.
I know we are running over our work session time, but council, any other quick questions you had? Seeing none, okay. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Liz. We appreciate your presentation today on this draft of the updated Parks and Rec and Open Space Master Plan. Appreciate all your work and effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are going to take a quick recess so we can have a restroom break before we start our regular city council. Bye. right, I'm going to call the regular City Council meeting to order for June 13, 2020. If you are just now joining us, we had our work session earlier to discuss the upcoming Parks and Rec Master Plan. I have a declaration of quorum, all members present. Please join me in the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I want to welcome everybody back to this environment. This is our second time doing it here at the community center with physical distancing and actual audience attendance. We had done it online only up until the last meeting for a couple months. And so if you are attending online and you would like to participate, you will have an opportunity to do so. I believe you can, no, that's right, only in person now. Correct, sorry. We used to have an opportunity for you to participate online, but since we are now able to do things in person, you have to actually be here to participate. But you can still watch online through the city's website. It's a YouTube website that you can go to and watch our meetings live. So we don't have any changes this evening to the agenda, Ms. Schmidt, no. We're at our first opportunity for citizen input. If you are here this evening, you'd like to talk to the council about items that are not on the current city council agenda, please come up to the microphone at front, introduce yourself by name and address. Try to limit your discussion to not more than 5 minutes and direct your comments to me. Okay. So the first...
Mayor.
Yes. Oh, Kathy. Is that the microphone on?
My name is Kathy Lloyd. I live at 1600 West Orchard Avenue in Hermiston. I am the board chair for the Stepping Stones of Hermiston Foundation, and I just wanted to thank the members of the City Council that took the opportunity Saturday to go over and see the Walla Walla Sleep Center. That's a pretty big time commitment to go over and do a trip like that, and I appreciate those who were able to put that into their schedule and who cared enough to really do some research into what it is that we are hoping to provide for Hermiston. I did pass out, or Lily actually passed out to you, a couple of sheets of paper that are just giving answers to the most commonly asked questions that we've received since we started this discussion. So hopefully, as you get a chance to look at that, maybe it'll help answer some of the questions you have. I did want to say, do you have any questions from your visit that I might be able to help answer at this time?
Council, do you want to do that right now, or do you want to talk during the city council comment period? Yeah. Do it during the city council comment period? Okay, Kathy, do you want to stick around later?
I would love to stick around.
So this that you handed out this evening, it's on your website?
I'm not sure it's gotten posted yet.
Okay, so you'll have like a frequently asked questions section on the website?
Yeah, and a lot of it's just been things that have come up from a meeting with the planning commission, meeting with the city council, those types of things. So we thought, well, we'd go ahead and develop this, and we are going to go ahead and post it so that people can see those answers. So, but thank you for your time and attention, for the dedication you show to the city of Hermiston. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. Others? Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, items A through G. Are there any consent agenda items the council would like to pull? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items A through G?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Harden, that we approve the consent agenda items as presented, A through G. Any public comment on those? No? Okay. Roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Ordinances and resolutions. Resolution 2160, employee handbook adoption. Mr. Smith?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, member of council, every year we review the employee handbook to make sure we're current with state law, federal law, any new court cases. And so with the assistance of our insurance carrier, City County Insurance Services, we provided another update. There's a summary of the proposed changes. Most of them really are just updating discrimination, harassment, bullying, all those types of policies. There is one additional benefit that we're proposing, and that is we have some permanent part-time staff, and that we're proposing that they get we're calling it an employee day, but basically a partial day that they could use to go and take care of, appointments or whatever. It's 6 hours every 6 months that they would get. A full-time employee gets 8 hours every 6 months. So.
What is permanent part-time?
It means that they're not getting over 35 hours a week, but they're not seasonal. So we have some seasonal part-time who, are just working during the summers, things like that. So that's the difference.
Okay. Thank you.
No, this would be really the only benefit. We are required to provide sick leave according to the state law, but that's the only other benefit.
So that's the only major revision other than the law changes to the employee handbook?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions by the council? So can I get a motion to approve Resolution 2160 and lay it upon the record?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Who was it, Mr. Primer?
I got second.
You got second? We said first. Oh, okay. Mr. McCarthy moved that we approve Resolution 2160, seconded by Mr. Primer. Any public comment on it? Seeing none, roll call.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Permanent food pod location, Mr. Smith.
Yes, so about a year ago, or over a year ago, the council authorized kind of a pilot project to test a food pod location on the city-owned parking lot at the corner of 3rd and Orchard. And so in our work session last meeting, we talked through what the staff came up with as far as 3 potential options for a permanent location. And those locations were discussed in depth, and there's a map in the minutes of the last meeting that's in the packet. And so the 3 locations were Butte Park, which would be in relationship to Funland and the Splash Pad, Newport Park, and then the current location off of Orchard. And there's the estimates, the cost estimates that were done for those locations. Really, the staff is just seeking direction. Which way do we go? What would the council like us to put our efforts into making a permanent location? Probably, depending on which one you would direct us to do, it might take a little longer. Maybe we have to start saving up a little money to make some of those improvements, different approaches. So I believe the staff has a consensus that we would recommend leaving it at the Orchard location. But it really was a hard debate as we talked about it, and the Butte Park location as being what might be best. But even Mr. Hunt, the current manager of the food plot, is recommending that we would stay at the current location.
Mr. Smith, what's preventing more people from participating in that pod location currently?
I think he's saying mostly it's people who are afraid or have not been willing to move based on the COVID restrictions to come and relocate to a new place. He said he's talked to a few different trucks out of the Tri-Cities, different places that were interested, but they didn't want to take a risk when there was so much unknown about the conditions they would be working in.
So the new food pod location would be water sewer?
Yeah, we would individual connections for water, sewer, electric. They would have better access to those. We would improve lighting and other things in the area to make it more attractive to people to come. Shade, if we can.
Who's handling the applications for that? Like if somebody wants to go there?
Currently, Mr. Hunt is handling
I guess I feel more excited about investing in that facility if I knew there was just this overwhelming desire to want to be there and there was more people wanting to participate.
that. Yeah, Clint, do you remember, did he give you any indication how many?
So far, he's been working with about 4 to 5 additional units who have been looking at locating here. Really, there's been a couple of things that really held back for this year. One is that the health department hasn't been approving the food trucks because of the virus-related issues. They're not really doing a lot of the restaurant inspections right now. And then the lack of the sewer and water utilities in a reliable way has kept some of the people away too.
But he's pretty confident, though, that he's got multiple people interested in that facility.
Yeah.
Other questions from the council?
Mr. Burrow?
I guess just kind of adding on, I think, given the site a place of permanence would attract more vendors, because I know like even having the water and sewer hookups are things that we don't have right now, and just making it a lot easier for the vendors, just like we do with development of streets, making it a lot easier to attract more businesses to come here. I think we've done a good job with that. I've even looked at it, and it's a striking difference, even adding sidewalk nearby. It makes the area look much better. And if, like we're talking about this parks plan, if we end up having HWAC or whatever we end up wanting to call it on that campus, not only do we have the high school, the expansion that the high school is going to have, but also we have that aquatic center, that rec center, and I think that giving it a place of permanence will hopefully, at least I believe, bring more people there.
Okay. Check.
It's not really a question, I just.
Your mic on.
I think that where they're at gives them such visibility that moving it elsewhere would be detrimental to, what he's got going there, what we have going there.
I don't want to create a personal location for one individual. I want it to be successful for multiple individuals. But, he has, put the most effort and work into trying to make it develop and be successful. My concern still is just shade. It's hot. It's 100 degrees out on asphalt,
Right.
And so trying to create some shade opportunities, I think, would be critical over there as well.
We can work on that as we put together a better plan on that. So.
Memo?
Sorry, I comment. I have been there, buy my tacos, and I go to the park and eat, and there's a lot of chicken in the park.
Yeah. Walk across the street. Is that what you're telling me? I'm too lazy?
It's up to you.
Thanks, Manuel, for pointing that out. All right. Anybody else have a question or a comment about the food plot recommendation?
Like to just meet, yes, my personal opinion is, the same thing, we build it, they'll be there. That's been the defining characteristic over the years that they've said, is that without having permanent facilities, it's difficult to draw people out of their existing locations to bring them down to where we want them, where we can have a central location. Everybody knows where it is right now. Getting people to come down there and use that facility once we, spruce it up as we were, putting the directionality of it, putting a fence so that you don't have vehicles driving through it, having a place for people to go. Walking across the street to eat. Well, they're going to be walking across the street to park. So, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And I think once we're finding some way of putting in, whether it's they bring their own tents to provide additional shade, or whether we provide some shade opportunities in there. However it's done, I think that putting it in one spot and keeping it, where everybody knows instead of having to go look for it, I think we're going to be in a better place. So my personal opinion is keeping it where it is and developing that spot for that purpose.
So are you making a recommendation?
I would make a recommendation. Yes, at this point in time, I'd like to make a recommendation that we go with the orchard site and move forward with that.
So
Second.
been moved by Mr. Primer, seconded by Mr. Gutierrez, that we approve or direct the staff to make improvements at the orchard location. Any other public comment on that? If not, roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes unanimously. There's something else I was going to ask about the application. I still support the project. It just had to do about the future of that project. The allocation now will be to open it up for next year, or how will that work moving forward?
Well, the cost estimates we've done and the planning we've done have kind of been conceptual. Now we would look at kind of get a little more hard and fast, exactly what we want to do. So if we can do some of the work in the off season when they might be closed, that would be our goal, but that's also the hardest time to get the work done, so we'll have to balance that out.
And we also talked a little bit last meeting too about a bus stop relocation, and I don't know if we've looked at that any further.
Yeah, we'll bring that as we into the discussions.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, next item, request to join municipal litigation against FCC. Can you explain that, Mr. Smith?
Sure. So the Federal Communications Commission has been working pretty hard to take away local control of rights of way and poles and so forth. And so they recently passed some drastic changes to the rules about how local government controls their right of way, how much we can charge for the use of the right of way, all those things. And soon after those actions were taken, a coalition began to form. Part of that coalition has been the League of Oregon Cities, as well as a number of other cities in Oregon. And I've spoken to the lead attorneys in this group, and they're excited to have another community joining the group, but there are cities around the country who are joining to fight back against this erosion of local control. So the cost would be up to $5,000 total to be a part of the group. They're initially hoping that there'll be a larger number, and so the final number might be, they're projecting could be 3,500 per city or per group. And so that's what we would be proposed as authorization to go up to 5,000.
So just for public clarification, one of the ways that we help to manage and control our public right-of-way usage is charging fees on the use of that right-of-way. And in this process, through 5G technology development, it has been suggested that cities are part of the problem why it can't roll out fast enough. And because there's a cost at cities to try and get this to them quickly. And so the suggestion at the federal level was it's the cities that are slowing the process down, and we need to lower the cost so that we can roll this out quicker. So now they've made it a point that we can hardly charge anything, and I mean potentially it'll cost us money to engage with these projects, and so the taxpayers will eventually end up paying additional fees, rather than the big corporations coming in here and paying those fees. And so that's where the litigation comes from. I remember when I was on the League of Oregon Cities board, immediately as this was announced, we had a board meeting like a day after this came out, and everybody at the board was like, we need to fight this. And I think the League of Cities has taken a position to join with other city associations to fight against this kind of federal overreach into local municipal government. And again, it's that process of local control. You know, we as a community should decide how our community develops. And so, you know, this is our way of kind of fighting back against the federal legislation that is too much of an overreach, from our opinion. So, question?
Well, yeah, no, it's more of a statement. You know, I disagree with the, you know, an agency such as the FCC, which has no public input or any, you know, the public has no way of saying no to this. They make arbitrary decisions and, you know, and force us to take their decision as what it is. Therefore, I think we should we, $5,000 is a drop in the bucket for what it may help us
Or cost us?
or cost us.
Yes.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Brogan?
A few years ago, I know Representative Greg Walden came with the FCC chairperson, Ajit Pai, I believe his name is. Do we have Representative Walden's support on fighting this?
I would say no.
Just wanted to make that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so can I get a request for action?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Gutierrez, seconded by Ms. Davis, that we authorize the city manager to join the FCC litigation at the price of up to $5,000. Any public comment? Seeing none, roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Miscellaneous engineering service contract at Anderson Ferry. Schmidt.
Yes, so we've had a contract with Anderson Ferry and Associates for our general engineering, water, sewer, streets, parks since 2015. And just as a common practice or a good practice is to go out, see if there's any other companies interested on a regular basis and work and see if that needs to change. We did that. We received no other valid responses at this time. And the city's staff has been very pleased with working with Anderson Ferry. And so we're recommending that we renew this contract again. And this way, you know, some of the projects that we do, either with state or federal money, they require this bid process to be done within a certain number of years. This allows us to not have to redo that for specific projects. So happy to answer any questions. And Chaz Hutchins from Anderson Ferry is here as well.
Chad didn't recognize you. Looks like you've been out working in the sun, too. So, you know, Anderson Ferry's been a good partner with the city for 5 years. Yeah, and we've had a great working relationship. I think we've done a lot of good in working together. I think Anderson Ferry brings a lot of value to our community in helping us design our city in a safe and healthy way, in a fiscally responsible way. And so they've been a great partner with us. They're a local-based organization out of LaGrange. Have their offices here, so I appreciate they've invested in our community as well, developing a business here too. So I appreciate Anderson Ferry and the work that they've done. I'm glad to see that the recommendation from the administration is for Anderson Ferry. Any other comments?
I really like the way that they actually...
Speak in the microphone. Sorry, pull the microphone down.
I was very...
Talk into the microphone. Pull it down. There you go. That way everybody can hear you.
I like the idea, the fact that whenever I ask any questions from anybody from Anderson Ferry people, I am very comfortable the way that they approach it, they deal with it and such. I'd like to keep them.
Doug and I sit on the Capital Improvement Plan Committee, and they're always very informative, very thorough in their information that they provide for us, willing to answer on any questions, so they've been a good partner with us on that process. Anybody else?
I motion we approve the engineering services agreement.
So, second.
Been motioned by Mr. Primer, seconded by Mr. Harden, that we approve the engineering services agreement as presented. Any public comment? Seeing none, roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. June 2020 preliminary financial report. Guessing Mr. K is going
He
to
says
do
he's
that.
going to do it from the back.
Okay.
I'm going to sit here with this microphone, and if it's okay with social distancing, these masks are fairly small for my big head. I'm going to regret saying that, but I'm going to sit here and talk about it. We always start off with looking at the urban renewal district. It had a good year. They were actually 4% above projected revenues. I think 2021 will be even better. We're projected to have an 8.5% increase in revenue. We'll see if that happens, but it ended up to be a very good year for the Urban Renewal Authority. When we look at the general fund resources, you can see we, on the year, are 5% over what we projected because of what we did last August to maintain our compliance with our minimum reserve policy. But if you look at the period March through June, you will see that we have a revenue deficit of about $732,000 in those 4 months. That is all pretty much COVID related, and we will not make that back. So yes, we're 5% ahead on the year, but absent what we did in August, we would probably be in the hole somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $650,000. On the expenditure side, same thing here. We've done well in minimizing our fixed expenses, if you will. We're 4% under what we projected, and most of that savings has come in 9 of the 12 months. When we were looking at what was going to happen towards the end of the fiscal year 19 rather, or calendar year 19, before property tax revenue was collected, we had asked for all the department heads to be very frugal in their expenditures, and they came through in shining fashion. You can see the percent variances that were positive. When we said, okay, you can spend, they did. To the tune of 40% over what was budgeted because they'd held off on necessary expenditures, and I appreciate that. And then as we went through the year, as far as the fiscal year, starting in March, we were over budget again, and we had to really put the brakes on due to COVID. And I don't know when the brakes will come off. But what's going to happen is we're going to continue to ask our department heads to emphasize only mission-critical expenditures to the extent they can for pretty much the rest of this fiscal year, because we will not have the revenue in a declining revenue environment to maintain discretionary expenditures, if you will. And they've done a good job, as you can see, in April, May, and June. We've saved anywhere from 13 to 15% over what was budgeted. We will continue to have that as a target. Then we look at where we ended up the year. Didn't have room on the slide. I don't have a projection for next year yet. You'll see that next month. But I had the pleasure of having Chief Hermiston call me and tell me, you projected you'd be at $2,311,000 at the end of June, and you came in at $2,316,000. And he had to comment on me, this guy's good, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm just guessing good, but I appreciated the comment, and I wanted to publicly acknowledge that. I'm trying to get a better handle on where we're going to be. I hope to have a couple of tools available to me in the next 90 days that will help me to do a better job with that. Just as an aside, you remember we had the cost allocation study where we have assessed fees to the utility funds, street, and HES. We will be making some transfers here in July into the general fund, and we will bump up where we start the year, if you will, with those contributions from the overhead allocation. I know it's working. There we go. Utility and street funds ended up in a very positive position for the year. You can see everything is looking very good as far as a little bit over in what we projected as resources, way under in what we expected as expenditures. The one place the resources did not meet the projection was with HES, with their continuing issues on a rate adjustment that's probably needed that will be discussed in the fall. Just wanted to make you aware, overall we're doing really well, and they have done a very good job of managing their resources. This is the capital projects report. You'll notice there's 4 items listed, but only 3 discussion points. For all intents and purposes, the water tank, the cathodic painting and protection is done, and East Theater Lane is done. I've made a command decision from a process standpoint, until we pay the retainage, which is the last payment that's made, you're going to continue to see these reports.
Now, I thought we were promised that wasn't going to happen.
Well, I'm backing up. We paid the bills, but we're in the process of finalizing what's going to happen with the Northeast water tank and the loan amount. And I really don't want to say that's done until we know exactly what we're going to have to pay. So I'm going to back up. We're doing good. We got significant projects underway and done, and I'm really proud of the city for doing that. My last slide is our investment portfolio. You see it's getting longer and longer. Wanted to make the council aware that we are going to have a big hiccup in the next couple of days. We have $1 million plus that's going to mature on Wednesday, what's called a bullet fund. And that is, we bought it at a price, and then at maturity we get $1,051,000. I will have to reinvest that in something, and it is not going to be reinvested at the rates you see for the corporate bonds or the municipal bonds. I will be looking at government securities to do that, to maintain our liquidity. Later this fall, in October, we will have another $250,000 maturing, and Don Leake, who is with Lone Pine Advisory Services, our investment advisor, and I have been scrounging for anything we can make that's better than 1%. Certainly we could do corporate bonds, but we're limited by what our policy says, no more than 35% of the portfolio. Municipals, we can probably make some headway there. I've given you at the bottom of this chart 2 percentages of our investment capability. On the left, you will see we have $8.5 million in total investment values, and I've done the percentage breakdown of how much is in cash, agencies, corporate bonds, and municipal bonds, including LGIP. On the right, you will see, absent the LGIP, the measures I adhere to, and that is cash, and we've brought the cash down quite a bit since the end of June. There's no limit on cash, there's no limit on government agencies, but we do have a 35% limit on corporate bonds and 10% on municipals. You will see we are right up against the cap on the corporates at 34.7%. I'd rather be a little more conservative in these measures than look at our total investment pool, as has been our historic practice when we throw in LGIP. I'm going to try to figure out, if this market stays down, how I might come back to you and say, can we change the policy yet again for a period of time during this situation the markets are in, to where I could invest more in LGIP so long as their rates are where they are now. But if I do anything now, I would have to sell a significant portion of the holdings to meet the policy requirements of how much I can invest in what class. I'm not ready to do that yet, but I'm trying to work on a plan to possibly come to you with a recommendation. It might be another meeting or 2 before that happens. Absent that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, just want to, make sure, Byron, you talk with the department heads in your weekly meeting and share with them how much we appreciate their fiscal prudence, not overspending their budgets, realizing that we're in a pretty interesting situation, as a community and a state and a nation where revenues are down. And so trying to make sure we balance our budget, not overspend our budget, and still provide a product for the community that they expect. And so I appreciate all the department heads taking ownership in that process and recognizing that, and also not spending. So coming back to our goals as a council is to always be fiscally prudent. So we appreciate their willingness to participate in that. Also, the question that I had was in future costs, as far as COVID-related expenses, we did get some coronavirus relief funds. We can't backfill debt, but moving forward, has the administration identified ways to use those funds?
Yeah, in my report, I was going to apologize. I had planned to have that item on the agenda, and I think our agenda management software ate that item.
Is that Lily? Isn't she the agenda management software?
No, I'm not going to blame it on Lily, but we have some projections that we plan to bring to you at your next meeting to get approval of programs and things that we would like to seek those CARES Act funds to be able to invest in the community.
So you don't have that tonight for us to look at?
No, I don't.
So is there an issue, and our next meeting is for another couple of weeks, and delaying that 2 weeks?
It won't. What we'll be able to do is spend some time between now and then getting a little bit better handle on how we would implement some of these programs, so that if you do give us authorization, then we can quickly move forward. So we won't lose any time. It's just at what point will the approval come.
And how did you come up with these projects and stuff?
Well-
What criteria did you use?
Well, we had to look at the U.S. Treasury guidance. They set a bunch of rules as to what those funds could be used for. And so we took a look at those. We've kind of watched what other cities have done. And so, just to give you some general idea, we're looking at potentially trying to do some utility relief to both residents and businesses, potentially participating in a mortgage or rent assistance program, as well as a business investment program as well, that we would be partnering with the county. Hopefully partnering with the county on all of those, because they have some funding available as well. So there wasn't really any criteria, but just, what are some ideas of how we could use this money to help the community.
So you guys had a regionalized conversation here last week. Was it last week?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, to talk with the county and all the other cities, make sure that there wasn't a duplication or double dipping, so to speak, of some businesses or individuals in the process. And so you kind of worked out how to do all of that.
Well, we're in the process of getting together a process
Yeah.
to work on. Mr. Kay is representing the city of Hermiston on that group to put together a plan, and then we'll work with the county. We're also approaching some of the other West County cities. If we are able to establish a utility assistance program, I think some of them are interested in participating with us, so that it would be one place that they could, residents could go, and depending on where they live, that they could still go to just one stop. So.
Well, I just appreciate you working as a unit with the rest of the cities in the county and trying to figure out solutions to help identify some of those businesses that are just super struggling right now. And as we've seen across the nation, even today, some of them being shut down again. And it's just going to be detrimental to some of those small family-owned businesses. So I appreciate the fact that you're trying to figure out some help and support for them, as well as our neighbors and friends that have lost jobs and revenue and income during this time too. So we also had any other questions on the financial report? Sorry. Would you need a motion to approve?
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Myers, seconded by Mr. Gutierrez, that we approve the June 2020 preliminary financial report as presented. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes unanimously. We did have a presentation from Hermiston School District Superintendent Dr. Mooney on the schedule,
Right.
but I knew she was going to run late.
Yeah, so if we can just move on and
Okay.
if she's able to make it before the end, then we'll bring her on.
Okay. City committee reports. Anyone?
We had a parks meeting, but the parks committee was the same thing we saw tonight, the parks plan.
Right.
Hispanic Advisory Committee, I don't know if we're going to meet this next week just due to COVID and the new governor's restrictions. And as far as EOTech, I don't believe we met either. So that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, the July meeting, a lot of times we put off until August. So the EOTech meeting did not happen in July. Rod, how about your committee? It's not listed on here, but maybe we can add it.
Well, it's not a city committee, so, but he can
Give us
report
an
on
update,
his
though.
liaison efforts to
Yeah.
stepping stones.
Well,
Turn your mic on.
somebody may have noticed that there's a sample hut constructed out at Northwest Farm Supply for the people, the community, to take a look at and see what that looks like. And we did have the tour. Appreciate those that attended on Saturday.
Thank you for driving us.
I think that the thing that I was surprised about was, in that situation, was, I didn't even think about this, that all the people were there, okay? Because normally this is set up so that they stay the night and leave in the morning and out all day long. But they were all there because of the COVID. That's their place of residence, basically. So we got to see it in full operation, and of course they've had to adjust some things that they weren't ready for either. So, but I was really impressed with the operation, and I think that they've been in this process for 5 years, and they continue to fine tune it. So I just like I know that a few others went with us. Yeah, maybe willing. It's nice to have a couple of plan commission members there. So I think that was well worth the effort. Went over. Appreciate Mr. Mayor being there.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to organize it too and coordinate it with Lily. Thanks for your assistance and help. We had, I think, 6 counselors there. Was that?
5.
And yourself.
Oh, make me feel bad, Jackie.
I said, and yourself.
Okay, so, a good representation from the city council was there, and I appreciate your willingness to charter the bus and drive it over there and provide us with ice cold water. I'm sure the vehicle was air conditioned. I didn't actually get to ride on it. Was the ride okay? Yeah, I'm sure it was. So appreciate your willingness.
Complain about how cold.
It was a great opportunity to see, what's being proposed kind of live and in action. And actually people were there, and we got to see them in their natural home, which I'm sure was uncomfortable for them. They probably felt a little bit like, guinea pigs or something on display. But we really appreciate the opportunity to actually see it in person and what, potentially would be reflected here in our community. A lot of questions came up and a lot of thought, I think, went into that. And, I think one of the greatest comments that I heard while I was there was, this is Walla Walla's solution. This isn't Hermiston's solution. And trying to figure out what works in Hermiston, will be unique to you and your environment, and what your community is going to support and want. And I really took that as an important message, because this works in Walla Walla. And so we've got to figure out just what we want and what we expect out of this. So I really appreciated the opportunity to go over there and see what they have in place. 5 years into it. It's a lot of work. Those people have put a tremendous amount of time in there and have sustained it. And they keep coming out every day to volunteer and support it. And so it takes a yeoman's effort, and I want to make sure you know what you're committing to, Kathy, and your organization and Rod, because it's a tremendous amount of work. And you know, they've had a lot of success stories. Can't remember the exact number, but significantly 66 people, I want to say, have transitioned from homeless into permanent housing, which is a huge statement for a community to be able to find resources, permanent resources for people that have been, you know, sleeping out under the sky. You know, we all know that mental health is a challenge, and trying to provide a place to sleep is important, and we all get better rest and mental health when we have a place to lay our bed and know for sure that we've got a place to lay our head down. I do still have some questions and concerns, but again, I think those come up when we talk about it as a community and on how this fits into our community. So I do really appreciate the council's willingness to go over and engage and kind of find out more information and if this fits into our community and what this looks like for us. So, thank you, Councilor.
It's interesting that Tri-Cities does not have something like this at all.
Yeah.
So that kind of surprised me.
Other comments about tour thoughts?
Well, I got it.
Okay.
You're going to be directed towards
Kathy.
So I don't really want to wait till she.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so in our conversation with some of the folks that were there, the people that were running it, one of the things that they were adamant that was that children were not allowed in their facility. And he expressed some concern that we were going to put this anywhere in conjunction with a park. They had a park that was nearby that it had caused problems by having it near the park. Another concern that I had personally with it is that, you know, the way that this one is proposed currently is that it's, you know, like theirs was initially with they're in at a certain time and out at a certain time, and it's not 24/7. But with COVID being what it is, stay home, stay safe, they were required to allow them 24/7. And if you have 24/7 people, you got to have 24/7 keeping an eye on it. And where's that money going to come from?
Valid questions, concerns that I think very shared amongst many of us.
So it was interesting because they had spoken to me a while ago. Can you hear me?
Yes.
They had spoken to me a while ago about the fact that they had gone to 24/7. And they did that through federal monies and grants that they received to fund that. They weren't required to do it, but it was something that they sought out to do to provide those individuals with a place during this time when they were really restricted from any place they could be. But that was, he indicated to me, this was Chuck, I can't remember Chuck's last name, too many Chucks. But anyway, indicated that they had gotten federal emergency grants to be able to fund that. That's not something that either the city or the Alliance is paying for. In terms of the children, yeah, we've debated a lot about that. And because we have concerns. At the warming station, we have not had very many children come, and when they come, they're in an open room with cameras. So our solution was to, if it's a child that we have concerns about parentage, that individual and child would be in the overflow tent with security cameras there available. We're totally open to other options. We also visited some with the warming station that as this opens up to then be able to use a warming station, possibly as a place for children. And then with respect to the question about the parks, our solution there is, as in fact it's on your answer sheet, is that if they get cited in some way for loitering, vandalizing, any sort of criminal activity, then they lose their opportunity for the huts. That's just an instance when they'll be trespassed from the site. And I understand that you actually witnessed someone being trespassed from their site over there. And it happens pretty quickly and easily because they work very closely in conjunction with their police department.
So their property actually belongs to the city.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So their property actually belongs to the city.
Right. And, that's one of the reasons, as we've looked at it, we would encourage the city to look at paying the lease from Agape House on the property, because then that gives greater enforcement power to the city.
But it also gives the city more responsibility.
It does give more responsibility, yes.
And that was one of the things that they said on the trespass end of it. It's like, okay, they have issues with the trespass, then that gets put to the city. And then it's on the city to try and mitigate that.
Yeah. But at the warming station, we have trespassed individuals, and it's been very effective.
Yeah, I think one of the other big takeaways that I saw was they had a really initially kind of confrontational relationship with the police department and how each of them were going to operate and whose responsibility was what, and where's the police's role come into all of this, and enforcement and also engagement with these individuals, because many of them are well known within the police department. And so now, though, it's a very collaborative relationship, and they've built a very positive relationship. The police department finds that it's very successful. They now have a place where people can go, where they can suggest they go. And so they don't have to go to jail, which helps save taxpayers' money. And so they can help them in this process. And so they found it to be a very successful collaboration and working relationship. And I hope that you've engaged with Chief Edmiston or somebody at the police department in starting and establishing that relationship already, because I think they'll be a critical component of how this initially rolls out and setting the ground rules and making sure that enforcement is in place.
I have to admit, when I did my first visit, it was just out of sheer curiosity. I saw a picture, I volunteered at the warming station, and thought, so I got a friend and we went over and we took a look. But after seeing it and visiting with them and hearing what they've been able to accomplish, yes, it's a work in progress, and it will continue to be. Their rules aren't necessarily our rules. Things have to be tweaked for your particular community. But to see what they've been able to do, to see how clean and neat and how individuals took pride in their specific hut, and had a sense of ownership there. To me, that was pretty exciting to see. That's really kind of what got the ball rolling, was going over there and seeing it, spending some time visiting both with their site manager and a couple of the people on the board. And I'd like you to know that, they've offered to come over and do a work session, if you want, with your council, and give you the opportunity to ask them any questions you'd like. They're very open to that.
I personally would appreciate that opportunity at some point to have them come over and allow the opportunity for the community as well to ask questions, not only for the council, but all other members of the community, and so they can share their story here. There was only 10 of us, from our community that went over on the bus and viewed it. It'd be nice if they could share it here in our community too, kind of answer some of those questions, because if we can kind of eliminate some of the fear that's concerned around it, and maybe answer some of the questions and concerns that you've addressed here and how they've managed them, and like you said, they continue to grow, they continue to learn, and as they evolve as an organization, they continue to get better. And so I really appreciate that opportunity, and I would welcome them over sometime if we could arrange it with Mr. Smith. Any other questions, comments with Kathy? Yes, Mr. Gutierrez.
I think my question would be for Jason. The people that are homeless, they congregate, they spend the time in Main Street. So how many calls are receiving to deal with their amount?
You have an answer for that, Chief? How much time you spend on a monthly basis doing or addressing homelessness or vagrancy, transient, that sort of stuff?
So I don't have a finite answer because that's not a statistic that we track. Having said that, just today, I know there was at least 3 different calls for service involving people that appeared to be homeless, where the police went out and tried to engage them in a positive conversation, and I know 2 of them encouraged them to continue on. They were in parts, in areas where they probably should not have been, but the laws are very challenging. It's not illegal to be homeless, and it does put some strain on law enforcement specifically.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point too. One of the I think challenges that a community runs into a lot of times is homelessness isn't a crime. And a lot of times people have to have access to a place to lie. And sometimes that's a sidewalk in front of your business. And so you can't trespass them, you can't move them, you can't force them to go somewhere else. And so the Downtown Association of Walla Walla has really grown to appreciate and support and fund the Walla Walla Alliance, because people are no longer sleeping on their doorstep, defecating on their doorstep, throwing trash in their, on their streets, because they now have a place to go and use a restroom facilities and shower facilities and get a regular meal and have a bed. And so in that case, when we do have situations like that, we can point them in a direction where they can find a bed and hopefully keep them out of our businesses and in our doorways and impacting our community financially as well.
The thing that we also need to realize is that homelessness is sometimes a choice, but it's not always a choice. Sometimes it's a situation that's been thrust upon an individual, and so we can't just categorize and say, well, those people, they deserve what they get. Those people, and we need to remember that they're humans, and we have an obligation to do what we can to be of assistance.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate your leadership, appreciate your organization and their efforts that they're trying to make this a successful union for our community. Other community or committee reports. I don't think we had any others. Right? The only comment I have on the mayor's report is just in monitoring the COVID situation in our community. Yesterday I read we were #1 in the state, zip code wise, as far as number of active cases of COVID by zip code this week. #2 in overall of the state, by zip code. And so that's including Portland and Marion County and, Eugene, Salem. We're #2 overall number of cases. And so it's out there and it's very prevalent in our community. And so I just want to make sure that people are practicing safe practices within our community, and making sure that we're trying to do everything we can to protect our friends and neighbors. It's very active out there. I know the hospital at this point is still in a safe position as far as ICU beds, but they are filling up. And so I want to make sure that our community is aware of the severity of it within our community and making sure that we're still practicing safe guidelines for the pandemic. Other comments by the council?
You said they were all filling up. They are filling up.
They're very close.
Give us that number. You said active cases, you have a number of that.
Yes. 7. Council comment? Anybody? Yes, Mr. Brown.
I do want to take a little step further, kind of building on what you said, Mr. Mayor. Not only following the guidelines that we have set forward, but doing everything that we can to make sure our community is safe. And that includes wearing masks. I care so much about our community. I know that there is so many people that want kids to be in school. I know that there's a lot of people in our community that want kids to play sports. If we don't do everything that we can, none of that will happen. If you want kids to play sports and you want them to be able to recreate, especially when school comes around, you'll wear a mask. If you want school to be open in the fall and for there to be no hiccups whatsoever with kids returning back to school, you'll wear a mask. If you want businesses to remain open and for them not to suffer any longer, you'll wear a mask. If you care about the Latino community and understand that most of these cases have been from people in vans, from people farm working, from people working on the farms, you'll wear a mask. We were expecting a peak to happen around Christmas time, around winter time. When flu season comes around, that's when the pandemic was going to re-come again. But yet, we're spiking in summer. What does that mean for the winter? Yes, there were 7 deaths. Yes, a lot of them had complications. Yes, a lot of them were very elderly. But that doesn't diminish the way that they passed away. Just because they passed away because they were very old doesn't diminish the lives that they lived, and it doesn't diminish the pain that their families are feeling, that the way that they're going out. People should be able to die in dignity, not over multiple complications, over multiple medical issues. I am trying, as a citizen and as a coach, to try to coach my kids right now. We have a baseball team, and I know that they're enjoying every single minute of it. It's really different. As of today, we're going to have to wear masks when we go into the dugout, but I want those kids to play. I've had to tell a couple of spectators that they can't be at the school district because we can't allow that. And in order to play baseball, we can't have any spectators. That's the rules that we have to follow. And yes, there have been people that have been upset. I don't blame them. This isn't normal. But we're not in normal times either. And so the people that I had to speak to were upset, absolutely. But when I told them, I'm sorry, this is the only way that we can play baseball. I'm sorry, this is the only way that you can. People that drove from Baker all the way to Hermiston to see their kids play, they had to see them from a place that you can't even see your kid. But they cared enough to take their kid to the game because they know it's good for their kids. Our community cares a lot about kids going back to school. And if we don't care enough to wear a mask, do everything that we can to make sure that this virus doesn't spread, then we're being hypocritical. Yes, this thing can be annoying, but this is also a tool to help my neighbors, to help my kids that are wanting to go back to school, to help my kids that want to play sports, to help my Latino community make sure that they prosper through this mess. And they're going to continue to get hit hard over and over again. Right now, we have over 500 active cases. I know that there are some that have recovered. But if any of those people at any point in time decide that they need a ventilator, that they need to go, this gets really critical when we don't have capacity. And so, we're, again, the #2 county in the entire state, only having 2% of the population. That's not good. That's not something we should be proud of. I encourage all citizens to please wear masks. Of course, I'm not trying to force anything upon anybody. I understand that people have their individual rights, but I'd also just very strongly encourage our community to care for one another and to see that, yes, it's an inconvenience, but every single member of the community is inconveniencing themselves right now because they care about their fellow citizens and people that might not be citizens. And so I ask our community, I ask our council to continue wearing masks until we are out of the pandemic, until we have a vaccine, until we have a light at the end of the tunnel, because right now it's pitch dark, and we're going even darker. Thank you.
All right, councilors, Mr. Gutierrez.
One thing I can say, I got a daughter that works in the hospital, and she has made the statement that this is the death that you die by yourself. They not allow the families in, and when the funeral, they don't allow people, so there's no closure, there's no grief. So you will have that in your mind until the time you can grieve the death of your family members. The other statement I will make.
Other councilors? Comments? Questions? Concern? Okay, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to, what I talked about earlier as far as the CARES Act funding and moving forward with that. But other than that, I don't have any other comments.
Tricia, we held it off as long as possible and you made it. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please welcome back Hermiston School District Superintendent Dr. Tricia Mooney. I'm guessing you guys must have had a school board meeting.
School board meeting this evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks
I like
for
to make an appearance. So.
leaving one meeting to another.
Meeting Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to, number one, thank Mr. Roan for your comments. I know I was forwarded an article today in the New York Times. Hermiston made the New York Times with regard to COVID and our current situation. And as we look at planning for school in the fall, it has become very clear with the huge uptick in the number of cases in our area that school is not going to look like we had hoped it would look. It is not realistic for us to assume or really plan for 100% of our students coming back 100% of the time. And that is heartbreaking to me. I know that when we closed our doors on March 13th, we put a lot of students in places where they weren't getting fed regularly, maybe not access to childcare for a lot of our families. We have families that have to make choices about whether or not they go to work to support their family or they stay home to care for their children. We have children now that really for no fault of their own are not social distancing. They are all put together just in small places because that is what parents need to do so that they can be out earning and working to make a living. This pandemic is devastating to our community, to our state, to our country, and we are going to feel the effects for years to come. And not only for me am I heartbroken for our kids that lost what they lost in the fall or in the spring with an abrupt closure. I'm heartbroken for the kids that are going to lose what they're going to lose next year when we can't have our kids back the way that we need to have our kids back. I'm heartbroken for our staff because we have a staff of committed individuals that love children and genuinely want to support them in their education and help them grow. And they're not going to have the opportunity to do that as they have in the past. We are looking at really losing more kids than what we ever have because of the opportunities that are going to be lost in schools and students not having an ability to connect with an adult. We have families that are going to be more than ever dealing with food uncertainty. This situation all the way around is heartbreaking. We have an administrative staff at the school district that is putting in countless hours planning for every scenario. I can't tell you how many times probably a high school administrator just doesn't answer the phone when I call because they know that I'm calling to tell them we need to look at another schedule. And that's not an easy thing to change. Our goal in the school district is going to continue to be our young children, or children in kindergarten through 6th grades, children that are most at risk when they are at home without childcare, and the children that's hardest to connect with in an online setting. But now more than ever, we all need to come together and do our part for, to get our kids back and to get our community back. We have 3 options as we look at opening in the fall, and schools are in a unique situation in that our opening does not at all correlate to county phases, because it's all under the Oregon Department of Education in cooperation with the Oregon Health Authority. Our 3 options are to come back 100% face-to-face, 100% online, or a hybrid model in between. And knowing that we cannot come back 100% face-to-face, we're working now at a hybrid model so that we can at least have some face-to-face contact with our students. Administrators over the next several weeks will be working on plans by level. Obviously things will look different at elementary than they will at middle and high school. And then plans that are unique to buildings, as we have buildings with different facility structures that we need to take into account as we look at how we're going to move students throughout the day, how we're going to provide meals for our students that are both on-site and are off-site, and that is no small undertaking. So there is still a lot of work to be done. Administrators will be engaging teachers as we talk about instruction and planning not only for how we can have our students back in some sort of hybrid model where we can see as much of our kids as we can, but also the Department of Education has forecasted for us that we need to be ready for another short-term closure. We know that in March, when schools closed and really overnight our teachers had to dig in and completely reinvent how they were going to interact with students and provide instruction, they went above and beyond. Our teachers did an amazing job, but we know still that what was provided with distance learning isn't what our kids deserve. And so we are planning for how things are going to look differently with another short-term closure or a long-term closure. And I wish I had better news with regard to that. Unfortunately, that's the reality of our situation. And we are going to move in the direction. I know that Hermiston's community that's been supportive of kids always, and I'm confident that we have a community that's going to step up and do what's right so we can get our kids back when we can get our kids back. So I appreciate your support in that, and would open to any questions about reopening, but also want to go back and just provide one piece of feedback, Mr. Garon. At the last meeting I was at, we talked a little bit about the new elementary building and the name for that new elementary building. We had done a survey. 60% of the survey respondents felt that the new building should be named after a geographical feature, like Rocky Heights or Desert View, our other elementary buildings. The suggestions we got, we didn't have any suggestions that were reflective of our Latino community and culture, so we are kind of going back to the drawing board a little bit and looking for suggestions that might reflect our Latino culture and community, but are also aligned with that framework of having that building named after a geographical feature. So I'm welcoming any suggestions before we go out. We will do another round of community survey before the board ultimately names that building. So I just wanted to follow up with you on that, and if anyone has suggestions, please send them my way. We will be putting out another request for suggestions through our social media platforms.
Thank you, Dr. Mooney. I know we've talked about this in this environment. We've talked about this one-on-one. I want to see kids back in classrooms this year. I think they deserve that. I haven't talked to the council. I haven't even talked to the city manager about this, but there are spaces within our community that we can help facilitate that conversation. And I would like us to consider as a council and as a city partnering with the school district to coordinate space, make it accessible and available so that we can have a more formalized education process this year. If we have to spread kids out, we have to do it in larger environments. There are spaces within this community that could be shared and that could be done in. I think that's super, super critical to the families of our community and especially to our kids. And we owe that to them to make some sacrifices, to make sure that they have a teacher in front of them, teaching them education. My experiences this spring and talking to parents and kids, it was dismal. Turnout was abhorrent. And I wasn't raised as an educator. I wouldn't know how to teach my kids. You know, and I also had a day job to go to, so I couldn't be there to make sure they were staring at the computer for 8 hours. And so, you know, we need those kids in a classroom, a well-educated teacher in front of them, teaching them an education. And we need to, as a community, figure out a way to accomplish that goal. Any other comments from the council?
I think we should offer up absolutely anything we have, you know, on behalf of the city. The school district has been in recent years very good about what we could and couldn't do with them. And so I think that it's time for us to pay it back.
Absolutely, I agree.
Mayor, I second that. That's an incredible solution that's very creative and yet very simple, that we have these facilities that we can offer up to the school district and, you know, make this happen one way or the other. Also, Superintendent, thank you very much for the feedback, and I very much appreciate you relaying that and even hearing back that it means a lot, so I appreciate that.
Dr. Mooney, as always, we appreciate you coming and speaking to us. And in the past, you've sent surrogates, and so we appreciate actually seeing you in person. And we know that you had to leave your meeting in order to come here to do this. So thank you for the work you're doing with our kids and the school district. And I know this is an unprecedented time trying to figure out solutions for our community, and I appreciate your leadership on that. Thank you. All right, with that, we are adjourned.